Good morning, everybody. You're all very welcome to this morning's BIM Brexit Customs Briefing webinar on this chilly and frosty Thursday morning in January. I hope you're all keeping safe and well during this challenging time. Just at the start of this session, I want to let everybody know that this session is being recorded and that recording will be available after this session. So there's no need for frantic scribbling of notes as we go through this presentation, but it will be available to you afterwards. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Kevin Honan. I'm Development and Innovation Director at Onboard Ishikawa, or BIM, as most of you will probably refer to us as. I look forward to meeting many of you in real life when regulations allow, and looking forward to that occasion. I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend this event. We've over 40 guests here today from right across the industry and from across the country. And I really do look forward to when we can return to having these events in person. However, it's also great that on this chilly, frosty January morning that we're able to facilitate this session and that we're able to get everybody around this virtual event to hear the important information that you're about to hear from the team in Performansc. As many of you are well aware, it's 3 weeks to the day since Brexit went live, and it's a reality. And I know many of you have been living with that reality for the past 3 weeks. And as the team here at BIM, we're looking forward to being able to continue to work with you and support you as Brexit impacts on your businesses. Our focus then, when Brexit came in, and our focus now, is to support you and to guide you on the actions you can take to minimise the disruption to your business. In the short 3-week period since Brexit went live, the team at BIM have witnessed a definite pattern of common issues emerging for seafood businesses trading with or through Great Britain. Those issues, and moreover the solutions and actions you can take today to address those issues, are the focus of this morning's short webinar. Shortly, you'll be hearing from customs specialist Conor Anderson from Performansc. Conor will focus on the issues seafood businesses have been experiencing since the Brexit transition period ended at the end of December, and more importantly, the solutions to those issues. As I've said already, we will be sharing the presentation, so there's no need for frantic scribbling of notes. We're also going to have a Q&A function at the bottom of each of your screens. You'll see a Q&A and 2 speech bubbles. Once Conor's presentation ends, the Q&A session will start, but you can type a question at any time into the Q&A box. And you don't have to wait until the session ends to put your question in there. I'm joined today by my BIM colleague, Gavin McGrath, and Gavin will be keeping an eye on those questions and ensure they are answered today by Conor, or that we provide an answer as a follow-up. Finally, just before I hand over to Conor, I would urge you to visit BIM's Brexit Hub, which is available at bim.ie/Brexit. In that Brexit Hub, you'll find practical advice on Brexit and a range of supports to help guide you on the actions you can take to minimise the impact Brexit has on your business. And now I'll hand you over to Conor Anderson from Performansc. And thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. Customs expert is quite interesting. I'm the original poacher turned gamekeeper. I was a customs clerk in the 80s, worked in the freight business in the 90s, and then worked in private enterprise throughout the zeros. And we've been trying to help organizations like yourself not make mistakes, common mistakes and common areas of focus, as Kevin has alluded to. We are seeing the same thing happening again and again and again, and we want to try and help. And we have, and I have spoken to a number of the participants already before, and we will continue to provide support through BIM for you for this very difficult time. You are already a very regulated business, but you throw in customs into that mix, and it's caused an awful lot of confusion, angst, disagreements, who's doing what, and that's what we're trying to help you with here. This is not going to be death by PowerPoint, and we're trying to make it as short and snappy as we possibly can. You all have a job to do, unfortunately, you'll probably feel sorry for me at the end of this. This is what we do all day, every day. Customs questions, trying to understand lobbying and making government understand the decisions that they make and the ramifications it has for you and your truck drivers and your partners and your customers, because we live it every day. You see it every day. But it's 1993 since we had to fill in paperwork between Ireland and the UK. Normally, I'd be able to see the whites of your eyes and understand if you remember those good days or bad days. But this has to be treated as a step backwards. It is a regressive step. The burden of administration is going to be placed on all of you guys, whether it's you personally or whether it's your admin or whether it's your haulage company. There are so many complex parts to this supply chain, which was a very simple just-in-time model. And we don't have the luxury of stockpiling or putting product up and down the M25 in the UK or in France because of the very nature of the freshness and the business that we're dealing with. So we're always going to work on a just-in-time model. And with that is the expectation that you, me, and everybody else has done what I expect them to do. So again, as Kevin has said, we welcome some questions throughout the presentation if they come. And we will get to it at the end. We have left at least 30 minutes at the end. If we don't use that, that's fine. You get some of your life back. But what we wanted to do again is to go just the changes. What's different from the 1st of January 2021? If you have either sent a shipment or received a shipment, even a personal shipment, the likes of DPD have struggled and they stopped, which would have been a very difficult conversation for them to have with Amazon to say, listen, this is beyond us, our people, our trucking network. And that I wouldn't like to be part of that discussion with them, but they are back in operation since yesterday. A number of other freight forwarders, big freight forwarders, have said, we can't do this anymore. We're not going to do that. So if they're struggling, you absolutely have every entitlement to feel isolated or that you are that you need support. And as I said, that's what we were here to provide for you then again. And we clearly defined the difference between Great Britain and the United Kingdom, because Great Britain has left. Northern Ireland remains part of the EU Customs Union. And we do use an awful lot of acronyms. We do use an awful lot of PBNs and GVMS. We will try and explain them. I was watching CSI Miami for about 6 months before I realized COD was cause of death rather than cash on delivery, which is what we always use. So we'll try and make it as engaging as we can with regard to the acronyms, but there are a huge amount of them out there at the moment. Some of them very new, some of them very old, but the new ones we'll focus on again. So we're also going to look at the registrations that are required. Again, there are some that you have already done or you may have registered with before and never used. There will be the discussion on health certificates and the pre-notifications, the 24 hours, the 4-hour notice, the 2-hour notice. There are different notifications depending on the product, whether it's live, whether it's frozen, whether it's chilled. There are different pieces on that. The flow of goods from Ireland to Great Britain to Ireland, and then via the Landbridge. Everybody talks about the great extra vessels we have from Rosslare to Cherbourg and to Dunkirk. They are there, but it's very difficult to get bookings. And there's double booking, and now there are some extra changes being made with regard to that we need to make you aware of with regard to the speed to market that you can get. It's a 26-hour transit time from Rosslare to Dunkirk. So any delays getting on it or getting off it or inclement weather, the big vessels will always be between Dublin and Holyhead and Dover and Calais. They sail all year round, but we do have issues with avoiding the land bridge. So we are making recommendations to people that they prepare everything as if it's going via the land bridge. And if the truck driver rips up the paperwork between Rosslare and Cherbourg, that's a win as far as we're concerned, because otherwise, if you're preparing and you send somebody to Rosslare and they can't get on that ferry, then they have to come back up to Dublin, it's going to put added pressure on you and your resources to generate all of the paperwork that they will need to get through the land bridge. Preparation with customers and engagement with suppliers and hauliers. We do have very solid relationships with a lot of our suppliers and hauliers, but with that comes the expectation for us to be all things to all men. And we go through Incoterms, which determines who pays what, where, when, and why. And that becomes very difficult for you to suddenly say, well, that's not really part of what I should be doing. It's part of your remit then again. And then just the last bit, and I said it's within the hour, common issues that we've seen in the first couple of weeks. What are the issues that are stopping people? Everybody is reading the news or looking at BBC had a very good article yesterday about pork being delayed and the 15 trucks that have been written off on pork. So we want to try and avoid that as much as we possibly can, and we're just going to give you some help with regard to any of the issues that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. So the landscape, how has it changed? It has changed insofar as that the Great Britain, the UK as a whole, has left the EU. We had free trade agreement with the common area that came in 1993. We could move product without paperwork, with a CMR and a delivery docket. I could move anything I wanted within the European Union. The issue we have in red, that you can see the UK is now a non-European country. And the other green areas you see in the bottom left-hand side there, the EFTA. Now, they didn't want to become members of the EFTA, which is the European Free Trade Agreement, because Norway paid billions to be part of EFTA, as do Switzerland and Iceland. They didn't want to be part of that. They wanted a more Canadian-style deal, but that's okay when you're dealing with something that takes 14, 15 days to get here. But when we're dealing in product that's 2 hours away, it's very difficult to get a Canadian style deal or a Japanese style deal in place. So it really has become a learning curve for us, for you, for everybody else to understand that the UK is no longer a part. While everybody was hanging out for a deal, it didn't preclude the need for us to fill in customs paperwork. And I'll cover that a little bit later on, to say that while the deal has been made, the burden of administration actually is harder when you're trying to complement or trying to get use of a free trade agreement. So all of the paperwork that's required is still there. It just means we don't have to pay the duty that would have been applicable under the World Trade Organization then again. So from the 31st of January 2020, they did leave, but there was that glorious transition period that everybody has benefited from over the last 12 months when it went up, finished on the 31st of December. So from the 1st of January, GB is no longer part of the Customs Union, but Northern Ireland remains. And what does that mean? If we move product between the south and the north, there will be no requirement for paperwork. Despite what Boris has said, there is a requirement for paperwork between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. There is a virtual border within the Irish Sea. And if there is product that's coming in from Great Britain to Northern Ireland that's deemed at risk of coming to the south, you have to make that declaration at the time of it coming across. And if there are any VAT or any extra rules associated with that, they would apply. So understanding what are the requirements, we're going to try and help you with that. There are a number of organizations who have already moved their freight to try and get it in and try to get benefit of the TSS, the Trader Support Services in Northern Ireland. But remember, they're there to help Northern Ireland businesses, not Southern Ireland businesses. And you will get a very rough, tough lesson from them to say, yeah, we expect you to clear the product into Northern Ireland, make it free circulation. There are an awful lot of salmon we buy from Scotland that comes into Northern Ireland that is destined for Southern Ireland, and that will face all the rigors of the customs clearances that we are facing when we're going to GB. So unless it's for destination Northern Ireland, we will have to clear that shipment or move it under T1, which is a customs guarantee from Northern Ireland to the south, which is causing an awful lot of people a problem because you have to have an XI EORI number to be able to do that. And an awful lot of, again, of our Irish forwarders don't have that ability to be able to issue, excuse me, a T1 for the north to the south then. So what does it mean for us? The World Trade Organization on the left-hand side was, you would have heard mention of that quite a lot up to and including the 24th of December. That would have been an absolute disaster for our business and your business with regard to some of the duty that would have been applicable for some of your finished products could have been up to 20%, and pork was over 40%, and some beef products were over 50%. Cheese alone was a 52% duty. And there's only 2 countries that eat cheddar cheese, Ireland and Great Britain. And an awful lot of the cheddar cheese that's eaten in the UK is made here in Ireland, but with a 52% duty under WTO rules, that wouldn't have made sense to continue. So all of our negotiations are done as part of the customs union. So Boris meeting Leo beforehand and meeting Michal, it didn't have any bearing other than just to say this is what we would like to, but all of our agreements, as we remain part of the European 27 Customs Union. So Great Britain will be able to do trade negotiations. They have plagiarized a lot of the agreements that we have. We have over 60 free trade agreements with countries like Turkey, with Canada, with Japan, with South Africa. The UK has taken most of those agreements, or they have a letter of intent with a number of those countries to be able to take those agreements and run with them. But just to give you an idea, a Canadian deal took 9 years to put in place. The Japanese deal took 7 years to put in place. So I can see why they want to plagiarize them and take them and run with them, because they are very good deals and they are reciprocal. Great Britain is also reaching out to its Commonwealth countries to say, guys, you know who we are. Can we get an agreement with you with regard to trade? So they will be able to define that, but any of the agreements that we have with them, our agreement is and was rushed. It's 1,256 pages, and there are very few people who have read it all. Unfortunately, I'm one of the few that have. So there are items in there that are worrying from our point of view. Certainly with regard to fisheries, we were watching it quite intently all the way up to and including the 24th of December. So there are things that we have to be aware of. There are paperwork, there are quotas, there are extra things that we need to worry about then. So within the customs union, we had the free movement of goods and no customs formalities. And down the bottom, as you can see now with the third country, again, Great Britain is a third country. So the FTA defines that, but we will still require customs formalities. Even with the free trade agreement, as we have with Norway, Switzerland, we still have the customs formalities. All it got rid of was the duty. So customs entries, the declarations, all will still be required. And a lot of people, unfortunately, thought once there was agreement that we could walk away from all of the customs requirement, but that's not the case. All of the formalities. So in a very regulated business as you are in already, it becomes, when you throw the complexity of customs in on top of your CHED forms, your health forms, your CAT certificates, your gather certificates, it becomes even more difficult. And that's what we're trying to help you with here today. So this quite a busy slide, but I just wanted to highlight, as an exporter and an importer, we have found in our one-to-one sessions with a lot of the people that are taking the mentoring support from Brexit, from BIM, is that you really only want to catch a product, bring it in and sell it to somebody, and that somebody then becomes responsible for all of the paperwork. In a post-Brexit environment, that was fine, because the guy coming in from Orkin to buy all of your cockles could just put them on a truck and bring them over to Great Britain and do what he needed to do, and then sell them into Spain or France after that. Unfortunately, it's much more difficult now. He has to generate enough paperwork to please customs and give them what they need to get the product into Great Britain. He then needs to do what he has to do to get the product for sale in France, and then again export the product using all of the customs to get out of Great Britain and then get into France and for his final market in Spain. So for every export, there's an import. So when you send something and you complete an export documentation from here to GB, somebody has to receive that as the importer of record. So the documentation is different. There's an export SAD, there's an import C88. It's not even the same document in Great Britain. The MRN number, the movement reference number that you've heard so much about over the last couple of weeks, is a different MRN number. So you need two MRN numbers, one to get out of Ireland and you need one to get into Great Britain. If you have a truck that's using the Landbridge from Ireland to France, your truck driver that you've been using for 20 years, Joe Blogg's trucking services, needs 4 apps just to get into France. 1 on his phone to get out of Ireland, 2 to get through the UK, and then 1 to get into France. And that's an incredible burden on him. And he's trying to figure out, all he used to do was pick up a product, go to a ferry, book the ferry, and get off the ferry and drive straight to the end user. So that alone, if it's wrong at any stage in that process, believe me, while we might take a somewhat lighter touch to it here, the French won't. It's either right or wrong. And if you don't get permission to travel, or you don't get permission to leave Kent to go to the ferry, then what are you going to do for those 6 hours, 10 hours that you lose? Because if you have to get your product to the processing plant in Holland within 36 hours, and you've lost 6, 8, 10 hours, then it's probably not worth sending it there, because you're going to have to end up returning it. So understanding your responsibility, even on an Ex Works, and I'll cover Incoterms in a moment, Ex Works will show your level of responsibility finishes when you generate the paperwork, or when the buyer pays you for it. But you still have a responsibility to make sure the paperwork is correct, and that you have all of the commodity codes, the description of your product, the country of origin on that. But as the exporter, you need to understand your EOI details, the necessary export documents. And from a certain period in time, depending on what the product you're dealing, it's either January, April, or July, because they have a phased approach in Great Britain, where we've gone for the big bang. So the health certificates may be required depending on the product that you're dealing with. And again, as an importer, if you're bringing that product from Scotland, as an example, what do you need to do? You need to understand, the registered with the authorities with regard to your EOI number, the health certificates, again, pre-notifications, because you have to tell the department here, DAFM, what's coming in, when it's coming in, and the timelines can be prescribed are as low as 2 hours in some cases, but are as long as 24 hours in some cases also. So do you have enough time in your supply chain to tell the department that in 24 hours you're going to be, within the 24 hours, you're going to be receiving a shipment of salmon from Scotland, and you want to be able to clear that, do what you do with it, and re-export it out as quickly as you possibly can. The duties and taxes, some of them again are relevant now if you have received a shipment and you understand that the product didn't originate to benefit from the free trade agreement, the TCA as we're calling it. The product needs to be either made in the UK or made in Europe, which is why DPD couldn't take all of the Amazon product in, because 90% of it was made in China. So it would be applicable for duty, because if you were looking for that Christmas present, or you were expecting it, or you're getting a bill from DPD to say you owe us £11 or £12, or that's because the product isn't made in the UK or isn't made in Europe, and will fall outside of the trade and cooperation agreement, and will be liable for those duties and taxes. And then on the right hand side again, the haulier suddenly becomes very, very important for us, because as I said, we do have an awful lot of small mom and pop shops. A guy with a truck that you can ring, he comes for 2, 3, 4 hours later, he rocks up to your plant, he takes the product. But is he ready? Because he becomes the conduit of everything for you, to the customs, to getting on and off the ferry, to work with the broker. Does he come up in a truck 172 Mayo and tell the broker that's the truck I'm going to use, because that information is required on the export declaration? But he suddenly rocks up in 201 Galway registration, and then that's going to be a problem going into France, because France used the registration number of the truck as part of their support mechanism. So we all know how entrepreneurial our trucking companies are with regard to getting extra loads, or getting loads, or putting an extra 2 pallets on the trucks, that on the shipment that they got from you. Those days are pretty much gone for them. And as a result of that, you probably will face extra costs from them, because if they can't get that return load back, or it's too difficult for them, or they can't get that extra 6 pallets they used to collect in Wexford after they collected your 12 pallets here. That charge was unfortunately going to have to be passed on to somebody. So do expect that there are going to be costs associated with this, and either build it in now or understand that using the correct Incoterm, which is a new term for people. So I'm going to go left. I'm not going to do them all. I'm going to go from the easiest to the hardest and most expensive. So on the left-hand side there, X works. If you don't have a contract or you don't have the ability to understand what these have been misused, misrepresented, misunderstood for many, many years, it becomes very important now for you to understand the difference between an X Works shipment and a DDP shipment on the right-hand side. On €1,000 shipment, it could be 400 or 500 euros, just because you said X Works to DDP. If you put in customs clearance in on top of it, you put in export clearance, import clearance, handling charges, all of those extra costs. So if you are working on a business that has a 10 or 12% margin, and you suddenly tell your customer in Great Britain, no problem, I'll pay the customs clearance, and somebody charge you 100 quid to get it out and 100 quid to get it in, that's £200 on top. That's a 20% margin off the top of your business straight away. So an awful lot of people are struggling with these, where if you're dealing with the Aldis and the Lidls and the Morrisons of this world, they're buying your product on a DDP basis on the right-hand side. They really only want to open up that back door and deliver. You deliver to them. If you're not there at 6 o'clock in the morning, they don't care about customs. They don't care about delays. If you want to remain a supplier to those big guys, you need to understand what you're asking your haulier, your broker, your admin, your accounts people to do, because if it fails anywhere during that supply chain, you're not going to be able to get that product to them in a usable manner, and that becomes very important. So where does the transfer of risk happen? And from a buyer point of view and a seller. So what are you? If you're selling something to somebody and they come and you meet them at the port or the dock and they buy it off you, then he's responsible for everything, all the way down to loading, the export taxes, the import. So the buyer is responsible. Great, that's suitable for you. But on the right-hand side, as a seller, what are you responsible for? Look at the difference between the green and the funny pinky color. And as I said, that can be 200, 300 euros, depending on the value of the shipment. So if you're doing small one pallet loads, that might give you €1,000 or 1,500 euros. You really have to ask yourself if it's worth it for me to continue to do that in the new world, whereby I have to fill in all of this paperwork and I have to be responsible for customs clearance, export, customs clearance, import. Is it worth it for me? And that's a difficult conversation to have, but it's better to have that conversation now before it leaves and you end up having to return the product, which is going to double up on your costs again, because everything coming back in also needs to go through all of the customs regime. So find an Incoterm that works for you. Look at CIF, because there's a little bit of shared responsibility in there. Look at the CPT, depending on what carriage paid to. Listen, guys, I'll pay it from Cork to Dublin, or I'll pay it from Dublin to Holyhead, but I'm not going to pay it all the way to Scotland. And work with your customers, work with your suppliers, because they're as confused as you are with regard to Incoterms. But as I said, you will have to call out these Incoterms on your commercial or pro forma invoice. We know a lot of people send product on a trust basis because some percentage of it might die, some percentage of it might get lost, it might evaporate. So you might issue a pro forma invoice and then they come back and say to you, it's 2% loss rate on the fish, invoice me 98% of what you originally put on the pro forma invoice. So there's a level of trust in there. So you need to work with them now. Don't wait until the shipment has left. Getting the shipment on board a vessel is not the be all and end all. It's where some of the problems start for people. So head off those problems, understand what he's going to need. You don't want to be having a discussion with a customer in mid-Irish Sea as who's going to pay the customs clearance, who's going to use the import of record. So find it, use it, discuss it, include it on the commercial invoice, included in the discussions with your client. But do not assume. There are no place for assumptions when it comes to Incoterms, because you will get caught out. And that's a difficult message, but don't assume, sure, sometimes I pay the freight, sometimes he pays the freight. It has to be very, very clear. And if it's not on a contract basis, it has to be as part of the invoice. It has to be mentioned on the invoice, because if you are paying costs, then you are responsible. Remember, if you are DDP, you are responsible. If that truck or carrier, anything happens to that truck on the way to Aldi in Wolverhampton, you are responsible for that. But on an ex-works basis, as soon as the buyer picks it up, he's responsible for everything from there. So any delays, if the container falls off the side of the vessel, who's responsible for that? That is determined by the Incoterms. So again, please do not underestimate what it means for you, your business, and the risk associated with getting that wrong. And I don't mean this to be some sort of hey, this is something that but you absolutely need to understand Incoterms and what it means for your business then. So if there are questions, I can see a number of questions coming in there. Hopefully they're about Incoterms or something we've discussed before, but I'm very happy to have a discussion. There are Incoterm lawyers there that have preconceived ideas about what they actually mean, but in reality, what does it mean for you? Who pays what, where, when, and why? And we can certainly help you understand what the risk is, what the costs are going to be, or what the expected costs are going to be when it comes to Incoterms. So the timeline, where are we with regard to GBEU? What's required from the 1st of January? They are customs paperwork, rules, CAT certificates, pre-notifications, health certificates. And again, as Kevin said at the beginning, all of these slides will be made available for you. I don't expect you to understand everything that's in there, but there are a number of people I know on the call already who do. But if you are looking at this and you're going, oh my God, I didn't know. There is no place for customs for them to, or for you to say to them, nobody told me. No, why didn't anybody tell me I needed all this? Customs will take the very pragmatic approach to say, well, you should know. If you're exporting or importing, it's not our job to tell you what you need to do. You are the experts. We have written to you 6 times is what you'll hear. Now, in most cases, if I receive a letter from Revenue and they're not looking for money off me, I put it in the bin. But they have written to you to tell you about rules and EOI numbers and all of the pieces that you would need. But in most cases, or in some cases at least, it has been ignored. But as good or as bad as we are here, we have the added complexity of a little bit of lethargy or a misunderstanding from a GB point of view as to what is required, because there are equally, and in some cases more, paperwork requirements because of the staged implementation that we are looking for between the EU and Great Britain. So there are 3 stages, as I said, from 1st of July. I will outline them in a little bit more detail, because are we dealing with live animals? Are we dealing with products of animal origin? Or are we dealing with fishery products? It's interpreted differently, depending on where you are. And so there's some of the rules with regard to the CAT certificates. This slide I particularly like, but it is open to interpretation and questions, but this comes directly from the department. So where are we? Are we dealing with products of animal origin and fishery products? Yes, most fishery products. Again, that leaves it open for interpretation. Most fishery products and live shellfish ready for human consumption. But what does that mean in real terms? Some of the department, some of the DEFRA people have an interpretation of it, and we need to understand what that means with regard to. And that's why I say your interpretation of the rules, your discussions with the department, with DEFRA, to understand who does what. You're all, or should be aware of Traces, but Traces is a European entity and is no longer going to be used in Great Britain. And they have a new system called the IPA FFS. And pre-notification and a health certificate is going to be required from April in there. So who's going to do that pre-notification? Because it has to happen 24 hours beforehand. And then if it goes further on into July, what's going to be required? So this slide I like, and I think you should understand it and interrogate it a little bit more to understand what's required. CAT certificates, IUU, docs required, risk-based documentary check. Unfortunately, all of the products that you're dealing with will be required. There's 100% documentary check on fish products and fishery products. There's a 20 to 50% then will go to red or orange, and then there's a 5%. Now, how they're going to do that, the department are saying they will examine 5%, and that means physically looking in the container or looking in the back of the box for the product. That's 1 in 20 shipments is going to end up with a physical check, which means it doesn't have permission to leave the port area until that check has been completed. And that could be a border control post in Great Britain, or it could be a border control post at Dublin. There are a number of different posts that we have. We do have 5 extra ports that have been nominated, thankfully, in the last couple of days. But the department officials will go and will look at some of the product that's coming off that. And that's based on a risk. Like, what does that mean? And we really don't know. If you have fallen foul of the rules beforehand, you might get a higher risk score. If you are 100% accurate each and every time, you will obviously ideally get a lower risk score when it comes to, do I send an officer to Donegal or to Galway or to Howth to understand what they're looking for. So look at it. But again, I'm always concerned when they say most fishery products. If you're dealing with the product that's not covered by it, then again, do you fall into the live animals up above? And it's already requiring pre-notification. It's already requiring health certificates from the 1st of January. So you'll see that on the left-hand side all the way through. So find your product. It's all driven by the commodity code. That's an 8-digit code that you use. It's a number that you would get for your product. Most of the people that I would be dealing with or have dealt with in the mentor are very comfortable on the commodity codes because you're filling it in on the CAT certificate or your Intrastat advice. But if you did receive that from Michelle 20 years ago and you've never changed it, it's time to make sure it's absolutely 100% accurate, because just because it hasn't been rejected before doesn't mean it's right. You weren't filling in customs documentation. Customs documentation is different than filling in a CAT certificate or your Intrastat advice, because they're there for statistical reasons. Customs, if they were in charge of water, we'd all be paying water rates now. They're very good at understanding how people should pay money and to extract. It's probably a harsh word to use, extract, but they do know how to get money based on classifications, based on commodity codes. So understand your commodity code, make sure it's the right one. Again, don't assume that because Michelle gave it to you 20 years ago, that it's still right. Things change, product change, our tastes change. If you go and try and find a commodity code for pepperoni, for example, then you will see that why there's a problem if it's cooked for more than 90 seconds or less than 90 seconds. If you're trying to get your product from Marks and Spencer's on the shelves, why is there no Marks and Spencer's product? Because a container comes in from Coventry 3 times a day from a distribution centre, and there's 4,500 different commodity codes on every container. There's 1,200 vet certificates required for every container. That's just overwhelming, and they just weren't able to do it in the time frame that would allow them with a 4 or 5 day shelf life to put that product up on the shelf, because they've lost 2 or 3 days. So do people want to buy product that's out of date tomorrow? No. So they don't even ship the product. So they're ending up shipping product that doesn't or require health certificates or vet certificates. So with regard to understanding what that is. So they're there to make money. They're there as a business. And if they are going to end up returning 30, 40, 50% of the product they ship in, there's no point shipping it in. We will get there in the end, but it's going to be difficult. There is the possibility of making it easier, but there's no desire at the moment to call all bets are off, because it's thankfully we're at a very small level of volume that we're dealing with currently. But I'm more concerned about week 4 and 5, because that's when the requests for March and February shipments come in and will hit the supply chains. And that's when it's going to be difficult to get on the Rosslare ferry. And that's when we're going to have to end up using the GB Landbridge. So prepare now, because the big shippers will be trying to do what you're trying to do, which is bypass the Landbridge. But unfortunately, the volume of our vessels is just not there between Ireland and France. So we're going to end up using the GB Landbridge, whether we like it or not. With that in mind, we're trying to help you understand what's required. Any one of these pieces in an export or an import process, remember, if I export something here, then it needs to be imported into GB or into France or whatever. If I bypass GB and I go from Ireland to France, then it's a EU to EU movement. But again, as I said, we don't have that luxury for all of our shipments. But so all of the shipments that I require, if I am going, if you do export to Japan or to China, you will understand that all of these are already a prerequisite. This is what GB has become. They are a third country. So we will need potentially the origin statement, depending on what it is or where it's going to, the classification, which is the commodity code I spoke about, your commercial or pro forma invoice, depending on what you're shipping and when you're going to ship it then again, any agricultural inspections that would be required or health certificates, and then the export SAD, which is called a single administrative document, that gives you your MRN number. Now, again, everybody's saying, what's an MRN? What's an SAD? What's a pre-boarding notification? This is the world that we are living in today. That pre-boarding notification only comes after you get your SAD completed and get a green routing on your particular SAD and all the way across that. And then the reverse of that is when it comes into Great Britain, what do they need? Is there a pre-notification in the IPA FFS, the import SAD, and all the classifications? So all of this is a world of pain for you and your haulier and your broker, but we have to abide by all of these rules. As I said, customs are expecting that you know all of this and that you are comfortable on this, but unfortunately that's not the case. And I'm not so worried about the 50 trucks behind me, I'm worried about the 50 trucks in front of me who are going to be either delaying customs. We're not getting the publicity it deserves with regard to the delays because there are no 50-mile tailbacks in Dover. BBC crew are not there and taking pictures of truck drivers going down the M20, and because you have to get your pre-boarding notification before you're allowed to even go to the port. If you turn up at a port in Great Britain without having your MRN and your pre-boarding notification, it's a £300 fine each and every time. So that's not something that you want to do on a consistent basis. So all of the delays are in the warehouses in Coventry, in Birmingham, and Manchester. They're not at the ports, which means we're not getting the visibility that we probably would like to get to demand. And while people can say, well, there's no delays at ports, there's not, because if you manage to get your product onto the vessel and get it off, then it's not going to be a delay. But the delay is happening back at source, back at the generation of the invoices, back at the generation of the pre-boarding notification or the export SADs. And again, because of the nature of the product that we're dealing with, we don't have that luxury of being able to have a 24-hour window where we can let a truck driver sit on the side of the M20. So any of those fail, we're not going to move our product. And that's why it becomes very important to understand all of the dependencies, my account department, my shipping department, my trucking company, all of that communication has to be seamless. Does it happen at 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning? Our supply chain has always been built on a just-in-time model. But if something happens and the ferries don't leave between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And if there's a problem with that, where does it happen? If the truck driver can't get something, if you're going to try and do your own customs clearance, then when does it happen? Because when you go home on a Friday night thinking, job well done, I've done my piece of it then as well, and you come in on a Monday and you get a call from your customer saying, where's my consignment? And you find out it's sitting in Dublin Port because the paperwork was wrong. Then how many of those discussions are you going to have with your boss or your company or your broker to be able to say, listen guys, this is just not tenable anymore. So horses for courses, I would always say, if there's a possibility to get an expert, if in the long run you want to do it and we get to a stage where we are in a steady state environment, then absolutely, then you could consider not giving your broker that €100 and you could do it yourself. If you're dealing with one product and you know what you're doing. But it's so volatile at the moment, and I've spoken to a number of people about this already. Let the experts do it. And some of the experts are struggling. That's why DPD have said no. That's why Redhead and DB Schenker have said no. They can't get the people. So understanding your business is one thing, but the dependency that you have, as I said earlier on, the truck driver giving you the 172 reg and you making your export declaration on that, and I'm turning up at the French port in a 201 Galway truck, then that truck is going to be rejected. Who's going to fix it? Is he going to fix it? Does he have the capability to be able to do that then? If he's engaged and you paid him to do it, or that's fine. But if you're doing it yourself, then you're going to have to look inwardly to be able to do that then. So some of the other pieces, that the commercial invoice requirements, and again, this is difficult. If you are generating if you are using SAP, this has proved difficult for a lot of organizations. If you are a one-man band and you use an Excel invoice, then this is very easy to do. If you're using Sage or you're using any of the other systems, you need to make a change. But all of those are required on your invoice. The name, the address, there's 3 potential parties to that: the sender, the buyer, the receiver. The invoice date, the pieces that I said about Incoterms, terms of sale, will cover it in there. The currency, the mode, quantity. So you need to look at that. There's 16 items there. And the last one then there is the country of origin. We have issues in our business that we buy. Carlingford is half in the north and half in the south. Where did the mussels that we grow in Carlingford Lough, where did they come from? I have a contract with the Crown, so that would probably tell me that they're Northern Ireland mussels. But when I'm shipping them over, do I have to put down the country of origin Northern Ireland? Because although Northern Ireland will benefit from being part of the customs union, they cannot benefit from being part of the rules of origin. It's unfortunately a UK origin shipment. So there are benefits, there are problems with that, but we need to be very, very clear as to the country of rules. I bring in mussels at 5 grams from France. I grow them for 2 years here in Ireland. Where do they become? Are they Irish? Are they French? Are they? And even as they're European, the country of origin is the country of origin. It's not the region. It's not an area. It's the country. And I have to make a declaration on a documentation, which is this glorious SAD document. It's well named, single administrative document. There's 54 boxes in there. There's 93 data points required in there. Everything from the exporter, importer, commodity, truck, the carriage, the nationality of the truck, who owns the truck, where am I going to get that information from? Where am I going to understand the vessel that is going on? It didn't make that vessel, it's going to go on a different vessel. So that's why I say this document, the forwarders that have been doing this for years are struggling with the pure volume. We are going from 1.6 million customs declarations last year. So that means in Ireland, we imported and exported and made customs declarations on this very form 1.6 million times. When we go this same scenario with Great Britain, DPD alone would make 6 million declarations. That's what they do as one company. So one company will do 3.5 times what we did in the whole of last year. So that's why everybody is struggling. I'm talking to people, I reckon that's somewhere between 40 to 50 million declarations that we're going to make inbound and outbound through Great Britain. And that's from 1.6 million. So we don't have enough customs officers. We don't have enough vets. We need to understand, is there a simpler, easier, better way of doing this? But at the moment, that's the requirement that we have, and it's not going to get any easier. So we need to buy into it. Yes, there are entries in the declarant's record, there are simplified procedures, but again, customs are not out there telling you this is what we think you should do. You need to understand what they are. You need to benefit from them, whether it's inward processing, outward processing, temporary storage facilities, customs bonded warehouses. They're all out there, but your business needs to understand how it's going to benefit from them. And if they are going to benefit, what does it mean? Because customs at the moment, in most cases, don't have any visibility on what you do. So when they're doing their risks, they say, well, I don't know who you are because I've only ever moved product between here and Europe before. So unless you've been exporting or importing on the international market, you haven't become interested to customs. So this suddenly becomes your day-to-day, everyday business then again. So this is just something we wanted to say, and with regard to the Landbridge. So where is it? What is required from a transit process? So even if I'm going to France and I need to use the Great Britain Landbridge, what do I require? We're very unusual and very unlucky. If I want to move product from France to Germany, that's not a problem. It's exactly as it was pre-Brexit. If I want to move product from Belgium to Holland, it's exactly the same. Ireland, as an island nation, with Great Britain as a chunk of land between us and our market, if we need to go through that particular land bridge, this is what we need to do. And that's very difficult for us to understand. Yes, if I manage to get a routing from Rosslare to Cherbourg or to Dunkirk, it's 26-hour transit time, but I miss all of this then. So all of those requirements, the transit accompanying document, the new computerized system, the pre-boarding notification, the goods vehicle, it's horrible. And I'm not here to try and depress everybody, but I'm here to make you aware of what you're responsible for. And that's a key piece. And as I said, customs are thinking that you know this already. And if you don't, we can help you with that. But don't assume because you've loaded your truck, you're finished with it. It's not as easy as that. So looking at all of it, yes, we should be lobbying. Yes, we should be talking to the government and saying we want more vessels. We want to bypass. Again, we had good news on a vessel into Holland this week, but everybody's trying to get the same capacity. Everybody's trying to get onto that truck. We will need to use the Landbridge on a day-to-day basis, whether we want to or not. So we should be ready for that. We should have all of our documentation lined up. And as I said right at the beginning, if the truck driver gets on the Rosslare ferry and rips up the paperwork, it's the happiest he's going to be, because he doesn't have to follow all of the rules and doesn't struggle, because as I said, the French are being very regimental with regard to it's either right or wrong, and they don't care about the Irish. Sure, it'll be all right on the day. It's not. It's right or wrong. If it's wrong, you're not getting on this vessel. You're not getting into Europe. You're not getting access to the European market. So it becomes crucial to understand what that is. So Andy, just some pieces, you're probably all very aware of this with regard to, we just put it in there. If you are an EU registered fishing vessel landing the catch directly into Great Britain, where can you do it? Obviously, it has to be an appropriately designated port, and with the illegal and unregistered with regard to the NEAFSC, and then must provide at least 4 hours notice to UK for fresh fish, 72 hours otherwise, or if it's going to be, there's some of them which are even 2 hours notification. And all the different vessel sizes, 12 meters we know about, fresh fish must be landed with the cert again into an IUU, and then under the last one there again, products from food approved vessels, again, key there, food approved vessel has to be approved, can load it into a border control post. It will get 100% review of the paperwork, and it'll land under the captain's certificate, and it has to be pre-notified by the importer. So who is the importer? Who's going to put in that detail into the IPAFA? Do you have a GB ERI number to give you access to the IPAFFS? Because traces is no longer relevant for Great Britain. And then a UK registered vessel, again, the reverse, landing into the Irish designated ports. Just an understanding, as I said, most of you guys are aware of this already. Some of the frozen fish pieces that we're talking about there again, but look at the timelines, 4 hours for pre-notifications and 72 hours down for the import subject to pre-notification. And then we're looking for any of the catch certificates that were required. Frozen fish, fishery products may not be imported by direct vessel landing. So the rules are there. As I said right at the beginning, you are a very regulated group of people already, but the customs is completely new. It's 1993 since we had to do all of the extra requirements from a customs just between Ireland and Great Britain. And that becomes very, very difficult for us to throw in on top of all of the other regulations that we have. So, as I said, just a couple of extra pieces. We did have some questions about the EOI number. What is it? What is it going to be? It's usually your VAT number with an IE in front of it, depending on when you register for VAT. And if it's GB, it's 3 zeros in front of your VAT number. So they're all the different people that you need to register with the department, with traces, with the ECS from the SFPA. If you have an TAN account, which is a trader account number, and a deferred account, you just need to understand the differences, and we'll go through that now in a moment and again. And then responsibility, who is responsible for what? And that will go back to the Incoterms. Who's responsible for the import? Who's responsible for the export? Who's responsible for the classification? Even if you're an importer and somebody puts a classification on an invoice, you're responsible. If that's wrong, you cannot assume that it's the option. It must be okay. If you know it's wrong, you're responsible as the importer. If you benefit from a misused commodity code and you get a lower rate on it then, or you've put in a different quota associated with then, you will be held responsible for that. So don't assume that that your shipper knows the commodity code. It's up to you to know it as the importer of record then as well. And the clarity and the timings, please, please, please talk to your haulier. Don't assume they know what they're doing. Some of them are really struggling with all of the apps, with the French app, the Kent Access. So they're really struggling with regard to that then. So just some of the items that we talked about with regard to the checklist, all of the registrations we spoke about, consider all of them, do all of them. Establish the commodity codes, understand with your customers and suppliers who's responsible for what. Get the commercial invoice. Everything comes from that invoice. All of the commodities, all of the Incoterms, they all have to be on that. And your broker and your haulier will glean, and the customs will glean all of the information they need from that then again. And do get a knowledgeable 3PL. There are a number of organizations that have been set up as a result of the requirement or an ambition to think that they're good enough for this, but some of them are really struggling with regard to that then. So get the right items on that then. And then this is just some of these are going to be covered in the Q&A, I hope. These are just some of the experiences that we have seen over the last couple of days then again. And so just to say that you're not alone, there is a 100% an increase in paperwork. There is some companies are more ready than others, and then you need to look at the availability of the booking. So any of those we can help you with, any of those, but there is a level of responsibility that you need to take as an exporter, as an importer. You are in business, you are responsible for an awful lot that you need to do yourself, but we can guide you or we can help you. But at some stage, you're going to have to take on the responsibility of generating the invoices, getting the traces and the IPFFS sorted out then as well. And then work out if there are additional costs, because those additional costs I spoke about at the beginning could be 30, 40% on top of what you've been doing originally. And if you're in a 20% margin business, then you need to question the viability of that particular market opening up for you on an ongoing basis. Maybe somewhere else. We do have some interesting free trade agreements coming up in the Middle East over the next, maybe that's a better, easier market for you to serve them as well. So at 10:31, I'm a minute over, I apologize. I'd like to open it up to the questions and answers. And Gavin, if you want to take over at that stage then as well and let me know what's been those number of questions that have come in already. Happy to try and answer them.
Perfect. So we have a good couple of questions in there, Conor. So first one in, well, will HMRC be charging around £180 for veterinary inspections at border control posts in April?
Definitely, there will be charges associated, and again, depending on who's going to pay them. It depends if they're going to do a full strip, could be even more expensive. It depends on what they're going to do with regard to it. The veterinary inspection, they are saying they're going to do about a 5% inspection, and the costs, I've heard everything from 60 to 200, but there will be costs, and we just need to understand who's going to pay them. This is from April. I think there's going to be some lobbying and some disagreements as to who's responsible for that then. But the costs that the UK are going to, we don't have any control. We certainly will have input to say that's outrageous or we want to, but those charges have not been finalised yet. But when they are, we can certainly discuss them with an open forum. And I would suggest it's going to get really busy between March and April as all of these charges are determined and defined. But at the moment, they're the charges, but who's going to pay them is going to be determined by the Incoterms we spoke about earlier on. Because if it's an ex-work shipment, the importer and the buyer will be responsible for those costs. So again, get the Incoterms right, and then you will be able to determine who's going to pay those costs, whatever they may be.
Perfect. Next question, Conor. Can I bring goods into Northern Ireland using the TSS process and then just bring them to the Republic from there?
Yes, you can. That's called smuggling. And I'm saying that flippantly, but that's what people are doing. Technically, yes, you can. But if the goods are at risk of coming to the south at the time of importation, then you have to make a declaration accordingly. And that will mean that you will either have to clear the shipments using the C88 into Northern Ireland and have an XI EOI number, or you will have to transit them from there under a warrant or a bond to the south. So yes, you can do it, but you need to make sure that you apply all of the customs rules that are, you cannot derogate from your responsibility by saying, sure, once they're in Northern Ireland, I can move them wherever I want. You can if you've cleared them and you've followed all of the customs rules. But that's very difficult to be able to say that, yes, if you are bringing them in and they're for end use Northern Ireland, then you can do that and use the TSS service. But if they're for end use the Republic of Ireland, you have to make the appropriate declarations at the time of importation.
Perfect. Next question, what are the actual duties on imported fish from the UK and what are the costs for exporting fish to the UK? Also, does it differ per species and who and when does this be paid?
Because we got the free trade agreement under the TCA, there will be no duty. So customs duty doesn't apply. So that could have been up to 20%. Some product was 18%. The majority of your fish products under WTO rules would have been between 6 and 10%. So there is no duty, effectively, customs duty on product that's coming in. And the same would apply, provided we can show the origin of that product as being either GB or European. So then there's no duty. If that product is Taiwanese prawns, then yes, there will be duty associated with that. But the benefit from the agreement that we put in place, then there is no duty associated with that.
Perfect. So have haulier charges spiked since Brexit? A contact from China tells me that the cost of a container ex-China has gone from 2.5k up to 10k.
If you can get one. They're actually, I've heard yesterday people were paying $11,500. And the Chinese government apparently are getting involved in it now. But there's no empty containers in China at the moment. The problem is we've 14,500 containers of PPE sitting in Felixstowe waiting to be taken out. So all of the containers that are coming in, all of the vessels that are on the high seas have been diverted away from the UK into European ports, and they're trying to get them back in. So definitely our costs for local haulage between Ireland and the UK will go up. Our haulage rates between Ireland and France and Germany will go up. Yesterday, there was a parliamentary questions. Northern Ireland hauliers were saying they're going to look for about a 12% increase in rates between GB, Northern Ireland and France. So yes, the rates are going to go up as a direct result of costs, timelines, and customs requirements. There's no doubt that's going to go up.
Perfect. The next question, Conor. Can a company avoid costs by completing their own customs paperwork rather than using a third-party broker?
Absolutely, but I don't recommend it at the moment. I think it's so new, it's so raw. If you have somebody like me with loads of grey hair that filled in customs form in the 80s and the 90s, then great. If you're dealing with one commodity code, then potentially yes. But if you're dealing with multiple products going to multiple destinations, then I would say maybe let it sit in live for certainly after April when the health certificates come in. But you can. But then, as I said, if you get the truck driver gives you his registration number, you put that on the export declaration and arrives in France and it's not 172 Mayo, it's 201 Galway, that's going to be rejected. Whereas the broker and the haulier would have a vested interest in getting that right. If you've precluded them from doing that for you by doing it yourself, then you're going to be held accountable and responsible for that then. I would say yes, if you have the relevant experience. As I said, there's 54 boxes there if you're comfortable doing it, but I would say for a load that's worth 6,000 or 10,000 euros, is it worth giving somebody 40, 50 euros to do that for me? Then absolutely, I would say yes, it is at the moment.
Perfect. Next question, what type of guarantee do I need for a transit shipment across the Landbridge? Great
question. It depends on the value of the shipment. So what customs would look for, they would look to understand if that shipment was lost or it never turned up, what would I guarantee? So they would look at a value of that particular shipment, and they would also take into consideration the amount of containers that you would have in the supply chain. So if you have a container leaves today and it's not going to arrive for 5 days, but you have another container leaving tomorrow and the next day, and you have 5 containers in the supply chain at any one time, your guarantee has to cover the value of all of those 5 containers, not just the one that's going. So if your value of your shipment is 10,000, then you're looking at that 5 by 10,000 and a percentage of that, not the full COGS value. Customs don't care about the cost of goods. They care about what they would lose out as a result of that, whether it be VAT or whether it be other duties associated with that then. So you cover that. So you need to take the worst case scenario and you need to take the longest lead time. And you need to then say to customs, well, at any one stage, I will have 10 trucks and the value of them is 100,000 each, but the duty would be X and the VAT would be Y. So I want to guarantee 60,000 on that. And that's how it would work. So worst case, highest value, longest lead time, multiplied by the amount of containers that you have. That's what the guarantee amount needs to be.
Perfect. Who inputs the data and the traces, the exporter or the transport company?
That depends how good a relationship you have with your haulage company or transport company. Ideally, it should be the exporter that does that within traces because you understand it better than hauliers. And as I said, some people have got hauliers to do some outrageous things for them in the past. But I think with the level of compliance that required with regard to traces, then feeding into IPA FFS, because the UK are not going to use traces anymore, I would recommend that you do that yourself as the exporter, rather than getting your haulier who only has a vested interest in getting through as quickly as he possibly can, because he's paid by the kilometre rather than by the benefit of filling in the paperwork. So I would say, yes, you can, but I would prefer, because again, if you get it wrong, it'll be rejected, to do it yourself.
Perfect. Will the consignment be opened in the UK if we use the Landbridge while importing from a third country post-July?
It could be as part of the risk evaluation that they're doing. As I said, they are using, if you are an AEO, an authorized economic operator, you will get a much lower score. Customs use an algorithm, they use risk, they use, if you are bringing in pillows from Chongqing this week, that could have been a signal from an organization to say, we're worried about pillows from Chongqing. The same will apply with customs. Unfortunately, once GB have left, they're not getting the same intelligence, market intelligence or security intelligence that we would share within Europe. So we don't know what they're going to do with regard to the risk equalization that they're going to do. But they will give every importer, every exporter, every product, every haulier different risk scores depending on what they are, what they're doing and their level of compliance. If they do open that particular product, you have the issue of it being potentially contaminated. They will reseal it and they will give you a note to say why they opened it, and that they will reseal it and then update the documentation accordingly. But there is a possibility that your client may not take that because the seal that you told them is on it is not the seal that's on it when they receive it. And the possibility of contamination might be too high. Certainly, some of the big supermarkets would say no, and then that's a big issue. But again, customs don't always talk to DEFRA. DEFRA always don't talk to customs. The department don't always talk to customs. So while I might have a vet at my premises sealing the container, it doesn't necessarily correlate that the guy in Holyhead said, oh yeah, I see the guy in Ballymahon has let that go through, it's okay. And we just don't know. So they will, they have the potential to do that, but they don't care about the contamination. If they have a risk score that's too high and they want to look in that container, they will look in that container.
Super. Next question, Conor. What's the difference between a TAN account and a deferred account with revenue?
Super question. Who asked that? Give them a bonus point then as well. So trader account number is a cash account that you would have with customs. The deferred account means you have a bank guarantee in place with customs. So it's a bit like a credit card. They pull off an amount. So if you assume you're going to bring in four loads and you need to pay money, you can lodge money into your TAN account, a trader account number. It was used predominantly for importers of cars where they would put money in for vehicle registration tax. But as you get your EOI number, you will also get a TAN account number that you can lodge money in. So when you lodge money against that, it's accredited to your EOI number. So your broker or your agent then can say, that's that company's, I'll put in their VAT number, and customs will then look to extract the money from that TAN account. Whereas in a deferred account, you have a prescribed amount every month. You might have a 100,000 guarantee, and then you can pull off that as you need it during the month and top it up if you need it. And a TAN account is effectively a cash account, and a deferred account is a credit account, if you like them.
Perfect. Next question, is there GV VAT on any food/fish products?
Not at the moment. No, we've been pardoned from that then, but at the moment, no. The food industry was lucky. The duty element of food, unfortunately, would have killed an awful lot of our industry. As I said, the cheddar cheese and the duties on certain products, but VAT is excluded at the moment.
Super. Next question, how do boats prove for customs purposes where the fish they catch originate?
It's either through the captain's log. Sounds like something from Star Trek, but it's depending on where it's coming from. There are issues, certainly, with regard to, if you take the issue we had with Skellig, is that at GB waters? Is it Northeast Atlantic? It's some of it is contentious, some of it is going to be, as I use the analogy of the Carlingford Loch. There is an element of it. We have, and I don't want to overcomplicate it, what's called cumulative origins that we would be able to look at. So if I'm bringing in a product and I do further manufacturing with it, so if I bring in salmon from Scotland and I then make it into a ready meal and I breadcrumb it and have I added enough to be able to claim made in Ireland on that then? And that's quite subjective. But if I've done what's called substantial transformation on that product, I will be able to claim made in Ireland on that then. So it really depends on, there is an element of trust and honour in there. After July, it's going to become more difficult, but for the moment, it's down to the individuals to making declarations on paperwork or using the REC system, which is going to give us a country of origin declaration on that.
Perfect. Last question, Conor. We might need a bit more information on this one, but what about postponed accounting on imports from third countries?
Well, that's quite interesting insofar as you can do that, not only from GB, but from all countries. We've postponed VAT. So if you can benefit from that. But the benefit from that, we've discovered over the last couple of weeks, you also have to have a VAT and a tax clearance certificate. It means you have to have an honourable relationship with the revenue commissioners. So if you do want to postpone that and pay it off against your VAT reconciled the way we would do it, you can do that, but you have to have a tax clearance certificate to be able to do that.
Perfect. I'll just leave it open for another minute in case anyone has any final questions. There's been a few questions there just on catch and health certificates, which might be more appropriate for the SFPA, but we'll follow up on those and come back to you. So, and we can publish the list of questions with answers as well, so everyone can see the answers to those questions. So I'll just leave it open for another couple of seconds in case anybody else has any other questions.
And again, from our point of view, as I said, I'm happy, and nobody wanted to talk to me for 27 years about customs, so I'll talk to people all day, every day if they want me to. So if people do have questions, that hub, the BIM, I work for a company called Performansc Supply Chain. We're working with BIM. I'm not saying that we're available 24 hours a day, but certainly if there are questions and you could submit them using that, we would be happy to help you in any way we can.
Perfect, Conor. That seems to be all the questions, so we'll just hand over to Kevin again, just to wrap us up.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks, Conor. And I just want to wrap up everybody by saying that our focus remains on supporting you and to guide you on the actions you can take to minimise the disruption to your business. And I hope in that context that you found today's session helpful and informative. And I'd like to reinforce what was said. Please visit our Brexit hub, bim.ie/Brexit, where you can find support and advice in relation to the steps that you need to take. And alternatively, please email brexit@bim.ie. That's brexit@bim.ie. If anything occurs to you after this presentation, I should have asked that. Absolutely no issue at all. We will field any questions at all that come through to us through that email address, brexit@bim.ie. Thank you so much to everybody for attending this morning and your attention, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you.